Hey guys, so I started kind of writing this up as a blog post, but it ended up getting way too long and I was getting bored of writing it, so I decided to do a little video instead. So basically today I just wanted to document my progress for NaNoWriMo 2019 day one, since I am doing it quite differently this year than I ever have before in the past. And that this year I did not pre-plan, I did not outline, I'm writing from the seat of my pants, I guess if you want to say, but more accurately, I am basically following Dean Wesley Smith's process that he calls writing into the dark, which he doesn't like the term pantser. He calls it writing into the dark because basically, you can't see the way ahead and you're just seeing little pieces as you go, which on one of my blog posts from ages ago, I said once that basically writing a novel is like, you're driving your car at night down the road. Well, you can see a little bit ahead of you because of your headlights, of course, but you can't see all the rest of what's ahead. And so that's pretty much how I'm doing it this time, and that's how his process works. But since this is the first time I'm officially trying it this way, I thought I would document how my day yesterday went. So yesterday was November 1st. I'm recording this on November 2nd. Yesterday was the first day of Nano, and as is my tradition recently, basically since I even started doing Nano in 2012, I took the day off work so that I could devote the entire day to writing and hopefully, get a chunk of words down and get ahead for the month. So my total word count for yesterday, I probably spent a grand total of maybe 4 hours actually writing, maybe 5 at the most, which is kind of funny considering that I literally took the entire day off from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But only about 5 of those hours, I would say at most, were fully focused on actually writing. My total word count for yesterday was 3,101 words, and that was spread between 2 different projects. The 2 projects I wanted to work on this month were the second book in the Legacy of Lucky Logan Steampunk Western series called Bastard of Blessing, and also the prequel to that series, which right now is called The Train to Tennessee. I think I will probably rename that, but that's what it's called now. However, Ethan Freckleton and I are not done with the initial draft of Starship Ass Book 3, which is supposed to also come out this month. So I went ahead and did also work on that yesterday. So yesterday I divided my time between The Train to Tennessee and Starship Ass Book 3. Like I said, the total was about 3,100 words. So in about 4 or 5 hours, that seems like a low word count compared to the previous way I was doing NaNoWriMo, which was to just, write words as fast as I possibly could. But I'm not doing it that way. Writing your draft as fast as possible is really good, especially for beginning writers, I feel like, because it keeps you from getting distracted and second-guessing yourself and all of these other things. But once you kind of get into the routine and the habit, and you get a little bit more experienced, it's not as necessary, unless you literally just want to get your book done as soon as possible. However, I have found personally, especially, that leads to a very messy first draft, and I spend a lot of time editing, especially since I tend to write epic novels. It's a disaster, the editing, when you fast draft, basically, especially epics. So with this process, Dean calls it cycling. I never really had a name for it, although this is actually how I naturally write. When I first started writing my first novel at 14, I would write doing this process. I just didn't have any fancy terms for it or anything. But essentially what you do is you just write, normal pace, fast, slow, whatever you want. But then every now and then you pause in what you're writing, you go back, you read over what you had already written, and then make whatever edits you need to make. Or let's say you're writing and you think, oh, I want this to happen, but I'm going to need to foreshadow that earlier. You would actually write what you want to happen and then go ahead and go back at that point and put it in earlier in the draft. And then, go through, make it flow naturally, etc., etc. So you're essentially basically editing as you go. So when I was first starting out trying to get back into writing my original fiction, this derailed me every single time. I could not finish a novel if I wrote like that. However, I basically wrote Bargain at Brave Bank like that this past June. So I was pretty sure that whatever point I'm at now in my writing journey, I could handle that kind of process. So that's why I decided to do Nano this year with that process. Because I found out, hey, it worked for Bargain at Brave Bank, right? And I had a blast writing that book, and it was so easy and fun, and so I thought maybe I'll try this next time. So I did that process yesterday, and as I said, my word count was a little bit low considering the time I spent actually writing. But here's the thing. So what I kind of realized while I was doing this was, and I had the train to Tennessee roughly planned, like in no way detail planned at all. But I did know essentially what I wanted to accomplish within the story itself. And I had figured out like how the conflict between those two characters was set up. And then obviously I know how it ends because that's what's referenced in the actual series itself. So I did have sort of a story flow basically in my head already. But as I was writing it yesterday, I realized that this process of writing into the dark and then cycling back to edit as you go seems like it actually helps with world building. One of the things I wanted to point out was that with my romantic epic fantasy, which was the book I was working on previous to Starship Ass and the Lucky Logan series, I had a really hard time with the world building. I just could not solidify pretty much anything. Geography, economy, religion. Like, it was all very difficult for me to really get a solid idea of all of that. I was trying to do it before I started writing the actual book. And I think that doesn't work so well because it's kind of like when you write your first few chapters and then by the time you're at the end of the book, you look back at your first few chapters and you're like, oh, that's not who that character is. Because when you first start out, you don't know your characters very well. As you write, you get to know them better. So then when you're done, you can go back and sort of, fix those beginning chapters to be more consistent with the character that you realized they were. And I feel like it's the same with the actual world and the world building. You don't actually know anything about the world until you're in it. And then you kind of learn about it as you're there. So it's almost like the same as if you were a reader. You're like literally figuring it out as you go, kind of how a reader would figure it out as they read the book. Which is kind of funny because Dean actually says in his talks about this process that that's why he likes it, because it's basically recreating the reader experience, which is interesting because I think that it actually is very much like that. But it was super interesting to me. Like, for example, yesterday I was working on the prequel story, Train to Tennessee, and I have them, the gang hits the train. So the train is going to Memphis, Tennessee. So I looked up, what are the train routes, even though this obviously doesn't take place in current day. But I use a lot of current day stuff as inspiration for various things in those books. So I looked up, train routes into Memphis and then traced those back into Arkansas. Where do those train routes go in Arkansas? And then I was like, okay, well, after they hit the train, they need a town to go to like, kind of celebrate their successful job, et cetera, et cetera. So I just randomly picked this town. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's like Beebe, Arkansas or something. So, of course, I went, searched. I stopped at the drafting. I researched into that town, its geography, its past, et cetera, et cetera. And I found out that in that town, 2 years in a row, they had mass die-offs of blackbirds. Like, just thousands of blackbirds just dropped dead from the sky. And I was like, that is weird and terrifying and creepy sounding because it was only like in a certain radius. They died of physical trauma, but like, what are they dying from? Flying around in the sky? Like, what is bashing the birds and killing them? Well, they finally figured out that it was due to someone setting off professional grade fireworks in the area. But that's not any fun, so I threw that logical explanation out, but I'm actually going to use that little tidbit of the blackbird die-offs in my book now. So that actually became part of the world building. And of course there's a different explanation in my books that's a little bit deeper and more interesting, I think. But the point is that from that random research, very basic, into geography, location, you know, types of trees, etc., in that town, I came upon that kind of bizarre little tidbit, which then inspired some backstory for that world. And it was actually the same way when I was writing Bargain at Brave Bank, which I actually wrote a whole post about that. I was trying to find a name for a town there. Ended up finding that there's really a town somewhere, I can't even remember now, called Blessing. But then that name for that one town completely influenced the world building for that series. As far as why they called the town Blessing, you know, which I made up a reason for that, which then influenced something else, which influenced something else, and it just, you know, and that's what I found out for the world building in Bargain at Brave Bank as I was writing and would do these research or decide these things. It was all building on top of each other, so it was almost like I was, you know, going to walk across a, like, chasm, but there was a bridge that was being built, like, plank by plank in front of me, so that I never actually fell to my death. I just walked across it plank by plank. And I feel like the same kind of thing is happening now with Train to Tennessee, writing with this process. And I think that's how I'm going to need to do the world building for my epic fantasy, is I'm going to have to write that without the preset constructs in mind, and then just kind of allow myself to explore, you know, those little things as I go, and then research, obviously, real world stuff to then inspire the fantasy stuff, and then it can all build on itself, and it feels more natural that way, I think, for sure. With the epic fantasy one, I was trying to force a lot of stuff, and it just really didn't work. And consequently now, that book needs a lot of rework. I'm basically going to revamp the whole thing, which is why that series is not out yet. So right now, that is looking like that series will probably happen sometime in 2020. No, 2021, sorry. In 2020, I will be focusing on the Lucky Logan series, which Bargain at Brave Bank is book 1. So I just wanted to go ahead and document these discoveries and these thoughts on this process that I'm trying for the first time for NaNo 2018. I definitely think it influences world building in a positive way. It is not fantastic for trying to write as many words as possible in a short time, which is kind of the whole point of NaNo. But I think it's okay, because I keep having to tell myself this. Even though I only wrote 3,100 words yesterday, all of those words are very, very clean. Basically, they will need no editing. So while it might have taken me longer to write them in the first place, I will save all of that time on the back end, because I won't have to spend a lot of time editing or writing in that foreshadowing or, you know, fleshing out the world building. Like, I won't have to do any of that. When I'm done with this draft, it will basically be a final draft. I'm just going to do one read through for consistency, then pretty much it's done. So, interesting experiment so far. I have been enjoying it. So yeah, that's how NaNoWriMo 2019 Day 1 went. And I think I will end this video here. If you have any questions or comments, or you're participating in NaNo yourself or anything like that, you can leave a comment on my blog or below this video, or you can email me, jrfrontera@gmail.com, or you can find me on NaNo. My profile name is jrfrontera. Send me a buddy request or whatever, and I guess I'll see you on the other side. But I will continue to give updates periodically through November, and we'll see how this process works and see if I'll actually be able to get to the 50,000 words, which is already questionable, as you probably know from my other posts. So we'll see. But anyway, it's been fun. It's been interesting. And I hope this wasn't too boring. But we will see you guys later. Bye.